Hello. Welcome. Hi. Okay. Hi. Good to see you too. So when we said fireside chat, how many of you thought there'd be an actual fireside chat? So now you know. We do what we say and we take it seriously. Alright, so I'm just letting you know. I want to start off by introducing myself, and then I would love for you all to introduce yourself. So we good there?
Yeah.
Let's just get into it. Amazing. My name is Constance Thurman. I am the founder and principal of Kora Insights, and we partner with investors to help them unlock capital year-round through things like delightful AGMs, LP introductions, etc. And I want to start off with a big thank you to you all for being here first and foremost. As you can see, this is a very intimate setting. We wanted it like that on purpose, so that way we could actually meet each other. And that's when relationships are cultivated, that's when the matching happens, right? I also want to thank a special few partners in the room. One, Jess, thank you for having us in this beautiful space. Yes, Jess! It's so lovely to be here, our resident, and the team has been so hospitable and kind to us, so thank you for this beautiful space. I would like to thank Ava from Carta. Thank you so much for allowing us to have these beautiful things that we have here. And shout out Ava, she knows what's up. Seriously, and can very much help your fund in a multitude of ways. I would also like to thank some of my colleagues and friends, Maria, Shanti, Monica who left, and also one of our advisors who's lovely, named Dustin Shea. So just thank you to everyone who made today possible, and also to the Resilience VC team who introduced me to Sabrina, and to Dustin who introduced me to Ari. With all that being said, I would love if you all could introduce yourself, specifically what brought you here today, right? How you first got connected to the ecosystem, maybe more broadly, and what you're up to at your respective funds.
Go for it. What's up?
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Okay. Hi, I'm Sabrina Bbridge. I am at Screenplay Partners. We're a Philadelphia-based investment organization, and our investment thesis really focuses around creating a long-term and more resilient economy going forward. Us having a resilience team, we're an LP in their fund. So we're really looking at ways that we can use our private capital investments to create that long-term stability. We have a really robust emerging manager strategy, which I oversee that portion of our work. So we've invested in over 20 emerging managers to date. We're actively deploying. We think emerging managers, we're really excited to see both the outperformance, but we also think that diversity of thought within asset classes can really create a lot of value, both from an economic standpoint as well as from an impact perspective. So what brought me to this work? I've been doing investment work for over 10 years now. Before Springpoint, I was working internationally, mostly out of East Africa, doing generalist investing into early stage companies based out of Kenya.
It's so cool.
Hi everyone, my name is Hari Joy. I'm the Managing Director of Private Investments at Blue Haven Initiative. We're a single family office entirely focused on impact investing. And we focus on 3 core sectors within sort of our broad definition of impact, and those are mental health, financial services, and climate. We primarily do direct investments, so seed and Series A investments, as many of you kind of focus on as well. But in addition to that, we invest with a select few emerging managers that we believe have additionality and real value add in those focus areas, and can also serve as a really good kind of proof point for the rest of the market. And so we try to back both founders and fund managers who are developing sort of a best-in-class thesis around how they define impact and how they bring that impact to the market to uplift communities with really scalable business models. As far as my own background, I come from a pretty traditional finance background, so I joined Blue Haven in 2020, but prior to that I was in private equity at a late stage bio firm, and before that I was in investment banking at JP Morgan. So I saw the light, moved over to the impact side, but still carry a lot of the same lessons around identifying best-in-class companies and people and trying to put real resources behind them. So thank you to Constance for bringing us together. I've only known Constance for a little bit, but can already tell that she's a real force of nature, and really excited to get to know all of you as well. So excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as you all can see, like this is super chill, meaning like at various points I'm gonna ask you for your questions and what you wanna ask them about, because the reason this is happening is for you all. Put simply, and to kind of give you some backstory, so we run a podcast, it's called The Company We Keep, where we interview investors who center and focus on community, whether it be in person, digital, hybrid, etc. And through that process, we've just realized more and more how it's just really helpful to have conversations out in the open with LPs and understand from your perspective like what you're looking for, at what point, how that might change. And so community and what that means to everybody is different, and how that's evaluated in your respective fund is also different. And so today, part of the thesis is how do we actually understand through perspectives, like how you're looking at that, at what point it matters, etc. And so I just want you to have that context as you all think about questions that we can also ask them. But with that being said, I do want to start off with asking you both, let's maybe set together a definition of what community for an emerging manager may mean based off of what you've seen and what you're looking for, or based off of even like where you believe that the ecosystem is headed. And we can go in 3 different directions, or we can focus on one, but I think the main thing is when I say that, what have you seen and what does it mean to you?
Let's do it. Sure. Yeah, I think community is, I mean, it's a really flexible definition and so broad. And, I think everyone in this room understands that, sort of the early stage VC environment is a people business fundamentally. And a lot of times, like, you're not analyzing the fundamentals of a business model. You're looking at the numbers, but what you're really underwriting is the founder, the management team, the people that surround them, and then sort of the broader ecosystem that they're operating in. Because so many times we've seen, a founder comes to market with a certain idea, a certain business model, they execute on that for a year or two, and then just by virtue of what's going on around them, they have to pivot and they have to change their method. And so it's in those scenarios where I think community really matters. And to me, and this is both from like an LP perspective as well as a GP perspective, community is just the sort of the cultivation of the support resources around you. And so that can be built up through, events and personal connections and coffee chats and all of that. But it can also mean like spending real time being genuine with your co-investors, with your counterparties, putting forth a real vision of what you want to see done with your business and with your initiatives. And I think that sort of general flywheel that's developed is how community is developed. And so, that could be like how you define community in the traditional sense of like friends and family and coworkers and all of that, but it could also be like the ideas that you cultivate, sort of the persona that you build in the markets that you operate in.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yes to all of that. I think when I'm thinking about like our formal underwriting process, we're kind of looking at, who people are associating with, we are really trying to assess, do you have that co-investor community, early stage venture for a lot of folks, I'm assuming a lot of you are in early stage venture and it's a team sport, right? So like, do you play nicely with others? Do you have those people that can help you build out that round? Do you have LP relationships that are diverse LP backgrounds? So like, are all of your LPs high net worth individuals? Or are you starting, obviously there's different LPs that can come in at different stages of your firm's life cycle, but are you starting to build those relationships? And are those folks in community with you? And then your founders, those should be like really strong community connections as well. I think, when I'm taking off my underwriting hat and just like looking at you as a person, do you have the supports that you need around you, right? Like, who are those people that you can go to, because this job is really high stress. There's going to be moments where you're going to be pulled in at a minimum 15 directions, right? And so do you have that resiliency in that community that you can lean on to really help you survive and thrive in those moments when things can be really tough? So I think we're also really trying to like make sure that, both the ecosystem and our specific managers have those people around them, and we hopefully are like an ally you're learning as well.
Love that. I love that because, first of all, the piece about being pulled in 15 different directions, I'm sure resonates with everybody in this room. Not only that, most of us live in New York, so then you have 18 directions, physically, literally, emotionally, etc. But it also means that you are really thinking about this specific manager and how, I guess it gives you a fuller picture of what that could look like, right? And I don't know if you have thoughts or you want to speak to that, but I imagine it's not one-dimensional. To your point, does it mean coffee chats? Does it mean I'm hosting a great event? Does it mean I have a sick AGM? Does it mean that I am really does it mean that, it can mean a variety of things. And so when you're looking at that specifically, is there anything in particular that you want to call out or that comes to mind? And I know it's a case-by-case scenario, so
I'll hear your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just what's authentic to you as a person and how you build relationships, right? If you're somebody who's like a one-to-one and like the coffee chats work for you, great. You do not need to throw like a rager. Like that is fine. But if you're somebody who like wants to work the room and do the happy hour thing and you want to get that economies of scale, that's great too. I think it's just more authenticity. I think the thing that we've been talking about this a lot is we're looking at managers or people that we want in our community. We're thinking about who are thought leaders, not necessarily influencers. And I think that like comes in how you engage with folks and that authenticity of how you want to develop those relationships long term.
Wait, can you go a little deeper into that? So what does it mean to be a thought leader and not an influencer?
I don't have a formal definition on this. This is still very new. It's hot off the press. But I don't know if you guys I feel like there's so much pressure in the venture ecosystem to like post, right? It's like, oh, we have to generate content, especially in this like AI world, right? We have to like, oh my god, I have to put out like 15 Substacks, I have to have a blog post, I have to do X, Y, and Z, and it's like those things all can be fantastic if that's authentic to how you want to build out your reputation in the space, and if you have something important to say about your sector and the way that you're allocating, 100% do it. But do it in a way that's authentic to your business and to you as a human, as a leader, and versus like this pressure to just put stuff out.
Yeah.
And I think some people do that in small, like I've gone to a lot of Jeffersonian style dinners where you see managers who are talking about things that are key to their sector. We have really thoughtful, inspiring conversations. Amazing. Some people are like writers and they actually do the blog posts and those are authentic to how they want to share their message. That's fantastic too. So I think it's not necessarily like a defined thing. It's just to both in how you build community, but also how you get your message out there, just making sure that it resonates with you and what you're saying actually is what you believe.
You were so glad you're here. How are your thoughts?
I would 100% agree with like that distinction between influencer and being authentic in your message. We've seen plenty of fund managers who 5-6 years ago they were super flashy and like went out and like had all of this hype around them, but didn't really have the substance behind that. And you can see now, like looking at the track record, like you have to have real substance behind that to actually succeed in this business long term. Like yes, it may play out in for a couple years. Like you may be able to meet founders and get allocation in different investments, but long term, if you don't have that solid thesis and that process behind you, it's really hard to maintain momentum with just kind of style and flash. And so I think that point around like being authentic and tailoring it to who you are as a person is super important. I think the other distinction is like a lot of people, the mental model people have is that like to succeed in VC you have to be an extrovert or like you have to be outgoing all the time. And I don't think empirically that's true. Like a lot of the best investors I know aren't people who like in a social setting are going to be the life of the party or like are going to be talking to every single person and walk around and get every single business card. Oftentimes it's the people who just have clear visions and are quiet in meetings, but then speak up like when they need to be heard. And whenever they speak, it's like people in the room will stop and listen to them. And so how do you cultivate that based on your own personality? If you're an extrovert, great, like lean into that and like do that because that's who you are as a person, but don't also feel like you need to push yourself to be someone that you're not. I think that's like the biggest part of cultivating community is like, it's very easy to tell, who's being genuine and who's kind of putting on a show. And then I think it cuts both ways too, because on the business side of things, when you're meeting founders, like that also comes through because founders want to work with people who add value to their business at the end of the day. And if you can come with like real genuine connections and like make introductions, like that reputation will precede you as you go out to market versus someone who comes in and says, here are all the logos on the pitch deck and like here's everyone that I know who's like a first degree connection on LinkedIn, but when the rubber hits the road, you can't actually make that intro. They're like, hey, I saw you're connected to this person on LinkedIn, and you're like, yeah, I just like kind of cold added them, like I don't actually know them. Like that's gonna impact your long-term reputation. So I would say at the end of the day, it's like back to Sabrina's point, it's all about being authentic and like how you cultivate community is a very personal thing. It's not like a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah, absolutely. And those 2 points of this authenticity and being true to yourself as a VC, not easy, right? Not easy.
Yeah.
Because I think, I'm just thinking practically, right? Like you have how much time to actually evaluate due diligence on a manager. So I'm like, how are you getting insight into if this person's being authentic online or not in the certain amount of time before you have to take it before your investment committee?
Yeah, I mean, that's really tough. You're right, there's not like a ton of time, right? Like, I mean, we see tons of fund managers. I'm sure Sabrina sees even more. But like, at the end of the day, the way I look at it is it's just the same as any social interaction. Like, if you're talking to this fund manager and when you're talking, they listen and they're not like on their phone and they're not looking away on Zoom and they're, you know, not fiddling with other stuff and they actually care about what you have to say. And likewise, when you're listening to them, they're like leaning into how you're reacting and they're, you know, positioning their statements to like the flow of the conversation, and they're not just kind of giving you a rehearsed answer. Like, you can kind of tell when someone is being genuine, and that's, I think, just like a mental model that I use is like trying to measure those soft signals around, you know, eye contact and like how they're actually interacting versus, you know, back to like the flash and substance, just someone who has like this pitch line and says like, you know, we're out here to save humanity, like we're reducing carbon by X amount, and has all these like stats, but doesn't actually understand the process behind that. Mm-hmm. So it's like in how people interact on a human level that I think you can at least get somewhat of a proxy for that authenticity. But it is hard, and I totally recognize that like the other side of it is you have to do marketing and like you have to market yourself. And you know, this is not to say like don't go out and like put out the best version of yourself, but also straddle that and have that balance of like how authentic you want to be.
Yeah, it's helpful.
Yeah, I would just say it's really hard. Like, I really empathize, and I think LP is always looking for different things, so it's really hard in those real-time moments to like tailor that authenticity while still being true to yourself, but also like meeting the LP where they are. But I would say, you know, on average, I don't think we've started diligence formally with any cause without an island for at a minimum 6 months, because we are really looking for that relationship piece, you know. And this is, I think, one of the more fundamental tensions of when you know, like our GPs and when I was doing drugs, it's like you get to check out the door real quick, and then LPs are like, oh, but it's only been like a year, you know. So I think that is like a fundamental mismatch in the asset class, but. You know, we're underwriting and we're trying to build, we want to be with you for multiple funds. We're looking at these as multi-decade relationships. So on our timeline, 6 months is a blip. But I can completely appreciate the actual real cash crunches and frustrations that can create on the emerging manager side. So we do try to move as quickly as we can. And so where we've tried to create efficiency is on the back side, because we actually just haven't found a way to get to conviction or have that relationship and that trust quicker. But we can, on the back end, create smoother and more streamlined diligence processes once we get to conviction. So we have monthly ICs, we have very structured underwriting processes, so we can move people through that part of the funnel more quickly. But yeah, it is tough. And I think the other thing I would just stress is, you know, like these are, like, you know, long-term relationships. So I think we've seen some LP or GPs that, you know, you give them the no now, and they're like, okay, bye forever. And they're like, oh, but actually, like, this was really just because I over-allocated an X sector this time around. If you came back to me in 2 years, I could be ready for your next fund. So I think just, like, really want to, like, get that, like, you know, think about these things really long-term and how you, like, keep those relationships warm, because you never know why the LP passed, and I will admit LPs are terrible at giving feedback and rationale. So there's a lot of times where it really is just, like, an internal thing that has nothing to do with you or your thesis. But sometimes there is a real no, so just like if there's ways that you can try to figure that out, I'd recommend. Yeah.
Does that mean sending a note? Or what, how do you figure it out?
Yeah, for the no?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I really don't know. I really try to push, we've talked about this, like about pushing our peers on like actually giving critical feedback and the why, and not just giving the easy answers. Quite honestly, there's no real benefit for an LP to have the difficult conversation. It only creates risk. So for instance, like our legal team, like we're not really supposed to put a lot of that feedback in writing, but I'm having to take a call. So then there is that time of like, I can only do so many calls. But my kind of rule of thumb is if I've had more than 3 conversations with you, I owe you something critical that you can materially take back to your business. You can say, absolutely not, this woman is crazy, I don't value that. That is totally fine. But I at least owe you that feedback for like the courtesy of getting to know you and your business. So that's kind of how I think about it. And then, you know, for other folks, like as we're going through, like more than happy to give feedback. I think that's really important ecosystem building.
Yeah, those are the rules of that. I also want to share with our lovely audience one of the things that you shared during our call, which was you talked about your Spring Point Partners approach to manager, forgive me if I butcher the name, but it was archetypes?
Archetypes, yeah.
And so, and I think that was a very interesting way of thinking through this in part. So would you mind speaking a bit to that?
Sure, yeah, so we do underwrite a lot of emerging managers. We look, you know, anywhere from what we call like a fund 0 or a pilot fund all the way up to your fund 4. And we're really comfortable with that risk profile, but we are trying to get a better understanding of what are the types of GPs that we want to be in community with and that we feel like we're best suited as an LP to be a support for. So we've done a couple different exercises, some around like prior track record and background, because we see a lot of like amazing former founders that we think are actually like really well suited to be launching a pre-seed or seed fund that can really have, to your point around building trust with founders who have like, I think one of the highest like BS radars in the world, right? Those founders turned investors can like really be catalytic there. So, but they don't have like necessarily like a strong track record. They're not like spinning out from a firm where they've been doing investment work for 15 plus years. So we look at the archetype of like your former background and actually have separate underwriting and diligence processes that we use based on your personal profile of like where your past experience is and how we think that matches up. And then we benchmark you across to other fund managers that have a similar profile. And then in addition to that, we look at like there's, we sold this from another LP, so I don't know if they would want credit or not, but they have an archetypes framework around, you know, like are you the 411 friend GP that like the founders call, or are you the celebrity who does all these things? And so trying to figure out like within those as well, like are there certain archetypes of GPs that we feel like do really well in certain sectors? And so we've been tracking that for the last like 5-6 years. It's been interesting.
Do we have the answers?
Not.
Come on, people want to know.
But it's fascinating data. We look at both like our managers and then other managers that we've been tracking in market. So it's pretty fascinating.
Very fun. It's a lot of interesting data points.
I'm like a huge data nerd. And I think like anything you can do to like add teeth or like structure to, I think, emerging manager work is really helpful, both because I think it allows us to have critical rationale to what we say yes, what we say no to when there is ambiguity and perhaps track record. But I also think it's like a helpful lens for other LPs that are, I like to call emerging manager curious, that are like trying to get into the space that maybe are trying to figure out how they underwrite or figure out what managers they actually want to work with as well.
Yeah, comes on.
And Hari, I remember one of the things you also mentioned during our call was how, in some ways, the way that a manager may approach something like community is also indicative of how they may run their business as a whole. And I'd love for you to speak more to that. Like, what does that mean for you, and how does that translate for the folks? Right?
Yeah, I mean, we had a really good conversation last week, and we were talking about the idea of community building kind of being an indicator of company building. And what I mean by that is the way you approach all the stuff that we just talked about around having these events and being your authentic self, like the structure you put behind that, the thoughtfulness you put behind that is necessarily going to be an indicator of how you're going to build up your own fund and how you're going to handle hiring and how you're going to handle ops and all of these things that sort of come together. And so in a way, like seeing the types of events and the you know types of interactions that a fund manager has is sort of an interesting data point to think about how they're going to actually build up their fund and how they're going to interact with companies and how much care they're going to give to each portfolio company and each founder. And so it's not like a perfect one-for-one, but back to the point around like being authentic, I think that's another sort of data point. It's not an explicit thing that we measure, but just a way that we can sort of measure that in a soft skills way around like how are you hosting these events, like who are the types of people that you're inviting to these events, or are you capturing a wide funnel, or do you have good distribution channels to get out there, and that's going to help inform like how you're going to actually hire for your own fund and how you're going to support your founders once it gets to that point.
Yeah, and I love that because it's not community, and I'm using this word expectedly for the sake of community. It's like there is a method to the madness, and especially in markets like these where there is a lot of noise, that intentionality I think really stands out. I am actually going to open it all up to you, And so I want to see what questions you all may have for her and Sabrina. And I think we'll be able to get into some good juicy topics. And so, Maria.
Yeah, sorry. Sabrina, Hari, I would love to hear y'all's community building style. Like, how do you sort of approach that? Like, what's the way that you think is authentic? How do you do that as an LP? Like, what do you do the most?
That's a good question.
I kind of like it all in small doses, if that makes sense. So like, I don't mind doing the big cocktail party things, but I'm kind of in that bang on in the middle of the introvert-extrovert spectrum, so I can get really like burned out by that. I really have been loving, we've been seeing a lot of folks doing these smaller, more intimate dinners where you can actually have real conversations on a topic, and I love those, especially when there's a really bossy host that's just like, no, we have a structured template of questions. I love that. So I feel like you just learn a lot from people, and you know, the space is like really crowded, but there's also really brilliant people, so I've just been like really excited to hear everybody's thoughts. But I think the things that I enjoy the most are the one-on-one conversations. Like, I think that's how I actually build like real connections with folks, is like sitting down, having lunch, having a cup of coffee, and just like getting to know what makes people tick. And that's like the most genuine and exciting that gets like fills my cup.
Yeah, I'd say largely the same. Like at Blue Haven, we like to host these Jeffersonian dinners where we pick a topic and we invite 16 to 20 people who are experts on the topic or kind of know perspectives on that from different levels, and we sit them around a dinner table and we have like a 3-hour dinner where there's just sort of that one topic that guides all the conversation, and only for those unfamiliar, like a Jeffersonian dinner is one where only one person is allowed to speak at a time and no side conversations, and so that ensures that everyone is contributing to the conversation and everyone is focused on the conversation. So I think things like that are both productive and also interesting because you get to meet such a wide array of people within the same sort of broader subject area. But at the same time, like we also go to conferences and we go to these big events, and we meet a ton of people and like exchange business cards and talk for like 2 minutes. And so there's always going to be like a bit of a balance. I think personally, I enjoy the more intimate settings and sort of a room of up to. I think actually like the size of this room is like the perfect type of environment to like get to so well, but to get to like know people and actually have that sort of back and forth with people.
Yeah. And I think, Maria, what also stands out is obviously when you as a VC have so many different types of LPs who are involved in your fund, like I think it just goes back to the piece of what does it mean for your fund and what that kind of culture that you want to create. Because realistically, we're all people and everyone's style is different. And so I love a small dinner. I love a big event, like it just, it really varies. And so I appreciate that. Yeah.
Oh, no. Awesome.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. This is a very insightful conversation. As somebody who is relatively new to this venture world, it's like cool to see the LP style, because we're, betting companies and saying like, what do you bring to the table? And then we're like, well, what do we bring to your table? So it's a very interesting kind of meta conversation to be in the middle of it. One thing that we're talking a lot about as GPs is just the state of the industry of venture, right? AI is big, but also just the nature of venture itself. There's a lot of funds on the table. There's a lot of ways to build a fund that are very different than even what's 5 to 10 years ago. So I'm just very curious from where you guys sit as LPs, what kind of conversations are happening at the LP level, given that it's a kind of a bubble up effect, and where are you guys seeing the nature of being an LP change, or are you guys at an inflection point? What are some of those conversations? Right?
Yeah, I'm curious what Sabrina thinks. You're completely right. Like, I think Rob and I were talking about this earlier, but like the industry is definitely seeing consolidation. Like larger players are certainly taking over chunks of the market because of the AI boom and all the hype around that. There are certain companies that are getting funded at a much higher clip versus other ones. But I think at the end of the day, at least for Blue Haven, like we continue to have a very robust direct investment portfolio, and we continue to invest in seed and Series A businesses. And so we still have high conviction that like we can find differentiated opportunities and find really great businesses that are delivering great returns and also delivering great impact. And because of that belief, we also think there are great fund managers out there that are doing that. And I think just from like a macro level, like we also think there needs to be emerging fund managers, and like there deserve to be emerging fund managers, because oftentimes like those are the people that have like unique perspectives and unique views on companies and industries, and have just like a different funnel in terms of companies that they're looking at. And so we continue to support those types of managers and like continue to find them. Now the sort of pace of asset allocation kind of changes slightly, and also for us depends on how much we're investing in directs versus funds. But even outside of like that direct LP investment, like Sabrina has led alongside us a great program with Catalyze, where we support GPs through a runway fund and give them capital to sort of set up and have their initial operation. So we also have different buckets of capital where like if we can't make an LP commitment at any given time, we can also figure out other ways to support emerging fund managers. So short answer to the question is like, yes, ton of change, like there's a lot in the industry, and I think it's certainly evolved over the past decade, but I think there's still a really important role for emerging fund managers to play. And if you look at the stats, and I'm sure like Kora has a lot of this, but like, you can see that like fund ones oftentimes have much higher TVPIs, much higher DPIs, and so there's like clear valuation dislocations with emerging fund managers and like the opportunities that they're able to discover. So long term, that's like a different question, and like fund 2s, fund 3s, fund 4, we can have like a different debate about, but like empirically there's clear evidence that like fund 1s tend to have some type of advantage over sort of large scale mega funds.
For you answers, Sabrina, just the same already. Explaining my whole business model. Listen, because to me, it's the heart of innovation at the end of the day, is what emerging managers are doing, which is fueling businesses that would not have a chance otherwise. That's why I'm optimistic about venture capital. That's why I got into it in the first place. It's inspired many years ago, and it's because it bets on entrepreneurs, and you're betting on the people who bet on entrepreneurs. And so don't lose that. That's all I have to say. All right, we see the distribution, and we see that emerging managers tend to outperform in the long run, and are innovative. And so you all keep doing what you're doing, and you'll keep doing what you're doing. Okay, got it.
I think everything, completely yes, and all the stuff that you both just said. But I think the other thing I'll just add is, emerging managers are so critical for so many different reasons, but I also just think if you look at the return profile like you're looking at for venture, the math doesn't math on a lot of these mega funds. So I think we're going to see like LPs when they're thinking about their portfolio construction and the return profiles that they need to get, that's not going to work from some of these allocations to these bigger guys. So I think like that's just, LPs are starting to actually have those conversations now. So I think that's been like an interesting arc. I also just, the differentiation in companies and access that you get for an emerging manager to all the things that Hari was saying are just like, it's not comparable. And there's a really interesting article written by a fellow emerging manager, Leslie Feinstag at Graham & Walker, where she basically just started calling like there's still venture and then there's consensus capital, which is how she's kind of bucketing some of these mega fund dynamics. And that was really interesting because if you really want to generate returns in venture, you have to be contrarian, right? You have to like bet on the kind of crazy thing. And the larger you get and the more institutional you get, the harder it is to bet on that like wild, like I think about some of the biggest like unicorns you've seen, like I would have never done that. Right? That's why you have your job and I have my job, right? So there's like, I think that piece where you kind of have to have that, and I think that's going to come from the scrappier, smaller firms. In terms of, how we think about AI, that is actually like really concerning. Like that one I don't have an answer for. I think it's one of those things where we're continuing to like watch and monitor. I was actually just writing a kind of state of AI report for our IC coming up next week. And I was like, how do I even start this?
Use AI, right?
I did use it before. So it's interesting, but I think that's just going to shift things. I think where I've been trying to stay grounded, I was saying this earlier too, I like fluctuate and like by the minute of like pure excitement and joy about really cool technology to existential dread. And that kind of just like ping pongs all day. But I think there's like some really exciting stuff, but as a huge history dork, actually where I started grounding myself in my research this morning was just like looking at major technological advancements and how do we separate out hype versus like what actually pushes us to that new frontier. And I think that's still shaking out in AI. I think we're starting to see it stabilize a little bit. The valuations are crazy, the technology is cannibalizing, and I think the big thing that's going to be different for AI versus others is just the scale and speed at which things can happen. So that I don't have an answer to. Our solution has just been back the best managers we can, and we're just going to continue on a steady deployment. We're not trying to time the market, and hopefully that will like ease out over different vintages.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Yeah. Spencer.
Thank you guys, man. There's definitely a lot of focus on like the blip of diligence and then actually getting you guys as partner for emerging managers. But I'm curious about post that. Obviously, you want a relationship that spans decades. How do you like engage in with managers? What do you treat that relationship as like people as well as with funds? Like over the course of fund 1 through ideally endless funds thereafter. Yeah.
I love building relationships with managers. That's actually my favorite part of the job. So, I think like from a structural standpoint, I have quarterly check-ins with all of my GPs. One, I just really get back really cool people, and I love getting a chance to talk with them. So selfishly, I'm like, oh, you have to talk to me, which is great. But you know, on the more formal side, I think the hardest points around the working capital and some of those other pieces, we really try to lean in. And like, I think it's the LP's job to like signal that we want a relationship with our GPs. I think a lot of times like LPs take the limited partner really seriously, and that is fun. Like that is how the business model works, and technically that's the appropriate relationship. We want to be a support for you all. So like I want to be here if you're having X need, like we want to be there for you. We also have been really developing out our platform of supports for our managers. So we did a listening tour last year where we hired a third-party consultant to do a listening tour with our GPs and other LPs, and just kind of figuring out like what are the areas that like GPs really want support. What's actually like something an LP should do versus not do. Some things we heard from our managers were like comms and media supports. We hired in a comms and media firm to help our GPs get actual like earned media placement. Like those are things that we can pay for and have economies of scale that can really beneficial to the business. But like probably the best use or expertise of my time, like I'm not a comms expert, but like fundraising support, that's actually something I should be doing as your LP. So I think the way we think about it is like trying to be really proactive and like signaling that we want to be in community and relationship with you, and also like what are the unique things that we can offer to your business that you know, from a relationship standpoint, I think build trust, but also from a business standpoint, also de-risk the investment. So, you know, it's like anything that we can do to make your business more successful rises our boat too. So it's kind of also self-serving in a really great and productive way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what we like to do is sort of bring all of the offerings at Blue Haven to bear when we have a relationship with a GP. So, for example, a lot of you know Vikas from Resilience or Meta today. I'm on his LPAC, we're investors in Resilience, so I serve on his LP advisory committee, and so kind of have the constant check-ins regardless. But outside of that, we try to provide support to their portfolio companies any way we can. So a really tangible example actually today, he reached out to me because one of his portfolio companies was looking at some like regulation that was happening in one of the states they operate in. We have a policy team in-house that has historically focused on sort of broader initiatives. So think about like strengthening democracy, like fair taxation, equitable futures, those types of things. But over the past couple of years, we've integrated that work into our investment work. So both for our companies and for the funds we invest in, trying to bring some type of policy expertise to those companies to help them think through, you know, the broader regulatory environment. So for Resilience, for example, this portfolio company needed help in just understanding like what a bill in a state legislature means and like what it means if it goes to committee versus on the floor, and like what are the chances of shaping it or providing input into it. And we have a third-party consultant that we have on retainer that we engage with for these types of things, and they've been in the lobbying space for a long time, and so they understand all of this. And so we try to bring those types of resources to our fund managers so that they can say, hey, we have a portfolio company that's in trouble with this thing, or like is thinking about licensing requirements in mental health, or like thinking about access and how do we actually support them to think through like the policy implications. So that's like a very tangible thing that we try to bring from a resource perspective. But then outside of that, obviously the more standard things like fundraising and connections and those types of things. But from like a communication perspective, it's just like how much the fund manager wants to talk to us. Like outside of regular check-ins, like I'm totally fine being like hands off and like they're super busy as is, and like they have plenty of founders to talk to, plenty of potential LPs to talk to. So like I'm not the type of person to be like, you have to have a monthly standing call with me or anything. It's like if I see you here and we catch up, that's great. But like we try to not add any additional burden to our fund managers or to our companies. And the last thing I'll say is, I didn't mention this before, but at Blue Haven, we have the private investment portfolio that I manage, and that's all in-house. But in addition to that, we have a broader fund portfolio that we work with a third-party advisor on. So think of like diversified asset classes like public equities, private credit, like late-stage funds in that. We're actually invested in Kora through that platform. And so for funds in that space, like we have a little bit less direct touch points, but same thing, like if they ever need anything, like we've developed those relationships with those fund managers, and if they need to reach out about something, we're happy to step in. And I think the biggest advantage is for the emerging managers in our in-house portfolio, we can then connect them to like those late stage managers for, you know, portfolio company fundraising or like mentorship or any other advice, because those are, you know, managers that have been around for 20, 30 years, and we kind of know the rules of the game at this point.
Yeah. For both of you, because to your point, it's like these are tactical pieces that in the end help your managers also be better, right? Like having marketing as a manager, huge, right? Having that paid for by your LP, even better. And so if I am a manager who is looking for an LP like you, obviously meet them, but I mean, right? But what are they looking for? Is that on your website? Is it broadcasted publicly? Is it on your email newsletter list, on your listserv? Like, I just think that these are very unique offerings that both of your respective firms have, family office, from stemming from family offices, etc. And so, what's your advice for folks who are looking for these kind of holistic type of supports?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. I mean, I think I don't want to bring it back to the community again. I will bring it back to the community again, because I think it comes down to like just trying to identify like what your target LP base is and saying, okay, here are the types of LPs that I want in. Like, is it a family office? Is it an institution? Is it impact focus? Is it, you know, more broad industry focus? And then basically find like the events and industry gatherings that really target that. And then I think that's where you can start to find like the list of LPs and like our types of institutions that can help support emerging fund managers. Because I mean, candidly, I don't think we do a great job of like marketing ourselves to the public. Like, I don't know how many of you knew about Blue Haven before tonight, but like, we're not, I mean, part of it is like we're a family office, and family offices are typically a little bit more reserved and like not public facing, but at the end of the day, we also do have a strong public presence, and like we talk about, like our principals are active on the speaking circuit, and they care about impact investing, and they've been doing this for, you know, over a decade. And so I think from our perspective, like we also need to do a better job of like putting that out there. And I honestly, I would love your feedback on like what channels actually get to you all. Is it like posting stuff on LinkedIn? Is it writing like a Medium post? Is it, I don't know, like reaching out through other channels? But that's something that we've been trying to improve as well, is like, how do we also become more public facing with our resources?
Feedback? What are your thoughts? LinkedIn, tell me.
Well, it's a really good question, and I was going to ask something similar, because I feel like managers ask me all the time, like, do you know LPs I can talk to? Where can I find LPs? Are there conferences with LPs? And historically, my answer has been like, maybe you should join Country Club, take up tournaments. That's where I would look for LPs.
Time to start golfing. Yeah.
But I'd love to know the real answer, like how often are you guys reaching out to managers versus how much are managers reaching out to you? And I would think also like part of this strategy of being hush-hush about what you're doing is because you don't want your inbox flooded with a bunch of not relevant inquiries, which is the same calculation that GPs go through when they're like, I only want to hear from founders that I'm going to invest in. So if I'm in CPG and you're doing aerospace, don't email me for an allocation. But curious to hear like how you guys think about that calculation, like where to meet GPs or how you put yourself out there. Take this one.
Yeah, I think very similarly, we're not great at marketing ourselves. Like honestly, the first time I didn't know about my organization until I got an interview there. So I was like, okay, and like knew who the CIO was. I was like, oh, this is real. So I think there is like this level of ambiguity and almost anonymity with family office world. So it is really challenging. I don't think we're necessarily like thinking about like major marketing campaigns or anything like that. We are on the road a lot. So like my goal, like I'm at almost like every emerging manager conference I've heard of I'm at this like right now. So part of that's like we do for my own like inbound and outbound and trying to just like generate top of funnel, but also like we can go for a lot cheaper than our GPs. So I also like to go and vet and see like what are actually the value adds for our GPs so that they can prioritize their time better. So that's been kind of like so it's been an exercise, and we kind of have like a ranked order of events we go to. So happy to share those later if anybody has conference recommendations that they would like to chat through. There's some really great ones.
Yes.
And then the other part of your question in terms of, the sourcing side of things, it can get a little overwhelming. There's a lot of funds. We actually just put in, I used to try to take like an intro call with everybody, but that just like actually wasn't realistic. So we've put in kind of an initial intake form, really short, sweet, with a couple of high-level questions. So at least we can screen out for folks that we know 100% don't meet our criteria. And just kind of be a little bit more respectful, both the GP, like your time, and then also our time as well. But it's, there are a lot of funds, and it is pretty hard to like make sure that you're like keeping a pulse on everybody appropriately.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you need to the
No, I just on like the sourcing funnel, at least on the direct side, we actually used to do that too. Like we had just a generic like email thing on our website, and like any founder could submit anything, and as you can expect, like there was a ton of just crazy shit in there that was not relevant at all. And we haven't, that's a technical term, crazy shit. We haven't done that for sort of GPs yet. It's actually something I've been like doodling on, whether or not it's like worth it to have that type of intake form and have people go through it. I think we found that if you have at least like something where you have to have like a pitch deck or like fill out something that with like key statistics, at least there's like some barrier to entry where like only people who are actually serious about it will apply through that. So maybe that's like a potential way. But to your question around like where we get sourcing, honestly, it's because we've been in a lot of these networks for a long time. It's typically through those networks, like impact focus, especially like people who know of someone who knows someone who's raising a fund, or like someone that's already been in our network who's raising a fund, and fully recognize that is not like the total funnel. So we're trying to figure out ways to also expand that. And oftentimes it's like going to these conferences, like I don't know how many people are familiar with like impact specifically, but like SOCAP is a big one that happens. Like the GIN, the Global Impact Investing Network, has a bunch of events. So even there, like fund managers will come up and we'll meet that, and we're obviously more than happy to do that.
Yeah. So one other quick thing. The other thing I'll add is I think the best way to find LPs is to talk to your fellow GPs. Like you guys know the real around like which LPs like are actually value add and can provide the different things that you might need at the like specific points within your firm building journeys. Like maybe like in fund 1 you need X, but maybe in fund 2 based on your strategy you need more strategics. So like using your network or your co-GPs to like actually figure out who are like the real legitimately LPs that you actually want to be in business with, I think seems to work out the best for our managers.
Yeah. And actually I did want to pull folks in the room, like where do you find, like if they were to communicate with you, what would be most useful? Would it be on LinkedIn? Like raise the hand. LinkedIn. You see what's
I'm old school.
LinkedIn.
I love LinkedIn.
Email.
Probably.
Yeah. Obviously word of mouth is super powerful. We'll take one last question.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you. I
please.
appreciate it. And I know I was a little late, so
No,
this has been amazing. I love that it's a small setting. I've gotten so much out there. I don't know if you guys did intros with Nasser, NAACP Capital, so VC or stage fund, leveraging NAACP kind of post and pre-investment. I was an LP for 7 years before that, and just decided to make my life a little harder to be a GP. It's been amazing, but my question is related around raising and the appropriate way to outreach people like you. I know when I was an LP, you guys are seeing so much. I'm really curious if there has been a manager that you guys kind of crossed the finish line where there wasn't that warm intro. They didn't really have some form of an in, but they did a great job in the appropriate way, maybe in a cold outreach way that you guys said, oh wow, like this is interesting, this makes sense. Is there any examples you guys can speak to as we think about, getting and having conversations with you where they weren't on your radar and making a good job of getting on your radar, and what did that look like, and what's the appropriate kind of channel to do that as we think about how they raise three?
Yeah, it is really hard. I think the cold interest can be challenging. We were just looking, I think we did 15% of our fund managers were from cold outreach that we've done. So it's like pretty small, but we do think that's actually really important.
That's actually
But I think it's important because I don't want to be trapped in the same network or the same bubble. And especially for where we're doing a lot of exposure to emerging managers, like I think that's really important. How I did find those folks though was at conferences or at events. So like cold emails probably won't work. Like I like just to be like I get like 15 managers a day emailing me about something, but I like at events I'm like willing to like have that conversation and see how that can convert. So like one of our most recent checks actually, I met the GP at I want to say it was at the Recast Accelerator event, the cohort event that they had 2 years ago. And then got to know her over about 6 to 9 months, and we just cut her a check into her fund one. And that one was really exciting. We know none of those other LPs, so that was like also a really cool thing. And she's got like a lot of corporate strategics, so it also like built our network. So like I'm always looking for those folks that aren't only from people that we already know, but that is the vast majority. But I would say conferences and events, I think the follow up from that can be really tricky. So like trying to figure out how to like strike that balance. I think the way that she followed up was. I mentioned something around like a question or whatever. She followed up with resources that were like value add to me, and like not to be a jerk, but that was like a really like nice thing of like, oh, she remembered this. She had a way to like help. So that was like a great way to differentiate yourself, but also versus the like post conference where everybody's just emailing a million people as well.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that, I mean, 15% is super impressive, so that's a really great data point. I mean, for us, the emerging manager program is still super early. Like we've only made 2 fund investments, so like the N is really small, and both of those were through kind of warm intros. But I would say, at least on the direct investment side, like we've certainly made 2 or 3 investments that were entirely like cold emails or just like cold outreaches. And there's a lot of similarities in how we run our processes for diligence for, actual company investments versus fund investments. And I think at the end of the day, it's like, it's really having that mission and sort of thesis tailored to like what our own interest areas are. So like, does this actually make sense? Does it seem like you care about Blue Haven coming in as an LP, or is this part of like a blast to 500 potential LPs? And like that's fine if it's a blast to 500 LPs, but like that probably means that we're not the best fit because we're so selective in terms of the managers that we bring onto the portfolio. And also back to a point that Sabrina made earlier, if there is like a no in a situation where we like do a little diligence and like get to know a manager and we say no, typically we like to give feedback and like, explain why, and it's certainly not a no like forever. It's just like a no for maybe that fund or even for like the first closing of that fund. Oftentimes the reply to that and the reaction to that is a huge signal. And I'm not sure a lot of GPs like realize that because again, people are super busy, like there's a lot going on. You may see us as like not like a super value add LP, and that's totally fine. But if you do care about Blue Haven coming in at some point in your fund journey, like how you respond to that is super important. And I've had like everything from like, no replies at all to like people who are very snarky in their response and like basically just burn the entire bridge, which to me makes no sense because it's like, even if we don't come in as an LP, like there's probably some co-invest in the future, like we're on the same cap table.
Or we're talking.
Right, yeah, exactly.
That's so funny.
And I mean like, exactly, like people do reference checks all the time from an LP perspective. So I think how you respond to that as well is a great signal. And oftentimes like, we would rather invest in like a fund manager who is really genuine and like comes off and says like, totally get that, and would love to stay in touch, like sends us updates, and we would look at them for the next fund or the final closing or whatever it is. So to answer your question directly, I think like the cold outreach, like it's definitely rare. I do think like, especially in these circles, I'm sure if you went on LinkedIn, you could probably find like a couple of mutual connections that we have. And so oftentimes there's like some way to get like some type of warm connect. But worst case, if you do have to do a cold outreach, there's still, I think, there's a possibility that we don't disqualify anyone for having like a cold outreach.
So here's the good news. You all are now in the know. which means you can tell other folks in your network who maybe don't know Sabrina and Ari about them. And that's how it keeps on growing. And I really appreciate your point too, Sabrina, about thinking maybe when you are, like, let's see, who do you, when you're a manager, maybe there's folks who you can introduce your LPs to because they're not in those networks as well, which is valuable to your work as well. It's kind of a unique perspective. With all that being said, can we give them a round of applause? And so, several fun directives for the evening. One is, I would love to get your feedback. This is a chill, small environment, so I'll be reaching out to you, and feel free to reach out to me with just your thoughts on how today went. We're going to be having these once a month, and so very much looking forward to building, growing, expanding alongside each one of you. The other thing is that we have a lot of food, so eat before you go, please. Please, I think it's last. I see cheese and grapes at least. So that's exciting. And there's some wine and all that. We are in the space until 9, and we will kick you out. Not Jess, no kidding. We're in it together. We're in it together. But all that being said, enjoy. I'll probably lower the lights because, you know, we did it. This is the Fireside. But yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you.
I was going to ask you,